So looking at his CV, his past experience include working with children in conflict with law, as well as children in need of protection. Yeah, and he has actually 22 years serving with the Department of Social Welfare. Yeah, currently, Encik Muhammad Ali Taib, he is actually the Senior Principal, Assistant Director, Children Division at Department of Social Welfare, based in Putrajaya. So I'll pass the time to you, Encik Muhammad Ali Taib. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. It's nice to meet you, Gina.
Yeah.
And yes, it is actually a great opportunity for me to be here today, especially with the presence of my very good friend, Amy Bala just now, and then from the MASW, and also all the members of the MASW. And today I am actually very delightful to be here to moderate the session, especially with the person which I admire. He is actually one of my idols in terms of when dealing with child abuse cases, none other than Dato Dr. Amar Singh, the consultant pediatrician and active child advocate. And in order to make sure all of us well known about him, and I think he is actually no need for me to introduce more, because most of us here is know about him very much already. And with the topic today, with this, the discussion on how to respond to disclosure of child sexual abuse and prevention strategies that can be taken by adults, including social workers and family members. Dr. Amar Singh is actually the very best person to share with us all the experience and also how to deal with those cases. And to talk about him, he is actually a senior consultant pediatrician. He served the Malaysian Civil Service for more than 35 years. If for me just now, only 22 years of joining the government itself, but he's been serving more than 35 years and led both a regional pediatrician department and clinical research center. He has long-standing interest in children in the community, disability, families, self-help groups, NGOs, child abuse, adolescents, disadvantaged and marginalized children, especially indigenous society. And he has accepted the Health Ministry to revise the child health services and introduce a number of national programs for children, including department screening. He is also an active child advocate and is the recipient of the Outstanding Asian Pediatrician Award in 2012 at Senior Advocacy Awards 2016. He has established a number of NGOs and family support group, and he is also an honorary senior fellow at the Gallen Center for Health and Social Policy. And I think with that vast experience and so on, I think he is the more than a very suitable person to talk about what we shall discuss today, which is working with sexual abuse, how to handle the disclosure. And with that, as we know from the Child Act itself, it is clearly mentioned in section 17 of Child Act with the explanation of kanak-kanak yang memerlukan pemeliharaan dan perlindungan. Those child who are being abused, it's either from the sexual abuse, emotional, physical, and the neglecting part, which most of us might not realize and really know about that, shall be disclosure today. And with that, without further ado, I would like to come to call upon Dr. Amar to make an introduction on the working with sexual abuse, how to handle disclosure. Silakan, Dato.
Thank you very much, Encik Muhammad Ali Taib. And I'd like to thank Amy Bala and Tina for this invitation and making the kind arrangements, and the Malaysian Association for Social Workers for very kindly inviting me here. Please call me Amar, and you can call Encik Muhammad Ali Taib Ali as well. Let's facilitate communication as much as we can.
Yes.
Now, I have posted some resources inside the chat group, and I'm going to post them again, but the secretary will post them again later for people who come late in case they don't see them. And I'll talk a bit about the resources in a moment. Allow me just to share a screen here. And you can see my email down there in case you need that. Okay, so as we talked about, the focus today is sexually abused children and how to handle disclosure. And I'd like to start off by saying I speak to you from the First Nation of the Orang Asli people of Malaysia, whose land I live. I learned how to say this from my Canadian and Australian friends who want to value the original people of the land, and I want to value the people on whose land I live as well. Okay, I want to reintroduce myself. I want to reintroduce myself a little bit. This is a picture of me drawn, which I quite often show. It's a picture of me drawn by a child. Notice that he's got my long nose, very well illustrated, my hairy arms, very creatively done there, and my lovely eyelashes, which many women envy. And you can see that, you know, he's caught the essence of who I am. I'd like to speak from the perspective of children. I've been working for a very long time with children, also with adults, since about 1978. I've been working with children in the community on the ground, also working with adults, especially in the area of disability abuse and poverty and stuff like that. And so I want to represent children as we talk today, not represent anybody, any organization. And I'm going to give you honest, reality-based sharing. And if I sound like I'm criticizing any organization, I'm not. I'm basically saying this is our situation and we must do something to improve the situation that we are here for our children. Now, some guidance for our session. Please don't do any photography, screenshots, or recording of session. The Malaysian Association for Social Workers will record session and we will use that session. And I've given you lots of notes and so don't ask for my slides because the notes are much better, all right? Now, we have a varying audience with varying experience and training this morning. So I noticed from the questions that you pre-asked, more about 50 questions, there's a very wide range of questions, some of them outside the scope of what we're going to cover today. So can I say, some things cannot be covered today because of time constraints, but I'm prepared to do more training sessions if you need, especially on how to recognize abuse, how to train children in protecting themselves from abuse, how to train disabled children from protecting from abuse, a very high rate of sexual abuse there, 50% of disabled children get sexually abused, and also how to develop proper child protection policies in our organizations, in our things. So if you need any of that additional stuff, I'm happy to do that. Okay, so there's a QR code for the link, but I just posted the resources and you've got 12 files there. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I want to say that the very useful one is this one here, Safeguarding Children, Training from Abuse. I've written that over many years. Recently, I asked many CSOs whether they will endorse it. I rewrote it extensively. This is a training guide, how to get your organization in good shape, how to keep it safe, how to train children. There are lots of training exercises inside there for children. Plus, I've also got some notes on counseling children. When you find that disabled, when they find they're sexually abused, how to counsel them. The second one I want to point out is this one down here, which is this cyber safety one, which I wrote at Women Center for Change. And you know, there's a link to go and look at all their books. They've got lots of lovely training guides there. I wrote this one for them, and I share that with you because I think this is one of the crises we have for sexual abuse right now, which is online. And I work with lots of children who are caught in this kind of situation. I've also got this list of organizations which I curated with a couple of colleagues about where to find help. And many of these are organizations that can help you and also offer some counseling and child protection work, and many of them are free. So that list is also inside the resources. All right. So what am I going to cover today? I'm going to cover very briefly some sides of sexual abuse and definition because I know the audience is varied and we need to set the stage. Then I'm going to handle disclosure. And I've been asked by the organization, especially focus on younger children, but I will cover a mixture, but younger and older children. Then the steps in helping the children to ensure their safety, how to cope with the child's feelings and their future, their counseling, and some future steps for us to consider. Let's see how much we can cover. It's a lot to cover, and I'll try and do it as fast as we can. What's the definition and size of sexual abuse? Here's our data for sexual abuse. I started working somewhere down here. At that time, people didn't even know the word sexual abuse. And this rise is not due to increase in sexual abuse, but increased detection of sexual abuse. And you can see that even with our reporting right now, our sexual abuse number is not very high. The real number is down here. Why? Because some children are labeled as rape and then they're not sent to welfare department at all. Many children above the age of 14, 15 will not end up in the welfare department's hand. They come to hospital seen by ONG and then they classified as rape, which is a mistake. I think we need to recognize that they are sexual abuse. So I have not included data for the last 2 years. Why? Because the data is not reliable. We saw a decline in our abuse report. That's not true. UNICEF survey, the reporting from many of our countries in our region show a 25% increase in abuse reports during this time, but our data doesn't show that. So I think the 2020 and 2021 data is a bit suspect. I hope this year we get back on track with better reporting. Now, those are reports. You must recognize that reports only give you a fraction of the reality, that even though no sexual abuse is reported here, there's vast amount of sexual abuse happening and lots of good data over the years showing that the rates have not risen over time. Okay, so a couple of us have done prevalence studies. This is the prevalence for sexual abuse from 3 studies, 8 to 26. The ballpark figure from this data is 10% at least. And the best man to read in the world is Finkel Hall. I've met him, and he collects studies from many countries in the world. So the bottom line, how common is sexual abuse in Malaysia? I want you to remember this figure, 1 in 10. 1 in 10 Malaysian children, when you see them, when you go to Aeon, when you go to any park, when you see 10 children, 1 is being sexually abused in Malaysia today. So that's looking at probably 0.75 million children right now compared to the small number that we picked up. So we're mixing up the vast majority. And I'm also aware whenever I share and teach that some of you in this audience have been sexually abused as children. That's a recognized given. Okay, 10% of you in this audience, and perhaps more because some of you who have been sexually abused want to work in areas where you can protect children. Finkel Hall's data shows that. And so I want to apologize if I bring up any bad memories. And if there's any way I can support you, please let me know. Okay, so remember this ballpark figure. This is the bottom figure. The real figure is probably 15%, not 10%. So we know the Child Act is a good act. We know that there are good definitions for sexual abuse, and this is our definition: sexual exploitation by any person for that person's or another person's sexual gratification. Satu orang gunakan kanak-kanak ini untuk nafsu dia atau nafsu orang lain. Very, very good definition. Notice there's no, definition of penetration of any sort, because this is a wide, good definition. Okay? We have also the Sexual Offences Against Children Act, which enlarges the definition of sexual abuse. So what is sexual abuse? Sexual abuse is making a child engage in any sexual activity. You touch a child anywhere in a sexual nature. You cause a child to see someone else having a sexual act. You utter words that are sexual in nature. You exhibit your body or make the child exhibit the body. You stalk the child. You groom the child, or you show the child pornography. So it's very wide. So recognize that sexual abuse is not just a penis entering a vagina or an anus. Remember, I'm talking both here about boys and girls, not just about girls, right? But it also includes someone showing their body to a child or making a child show their body to them. There may be no physical contact, or even child pornography, which is very, just pornography, showing children naked pictures, which is very common today. Now, some of you asked a question about how to recognize child abuse, and I've got some notes there. Please have a look at them, but I'd like to cover 1 or 2 key issues. When a child tells you they've been sexually abused, you believe them. Children don't lie so much. Adults lie a lot. All of you lie all the time. If I ask Tina, how are you today? Tina will say, I'm fine, thank you. But she might have a very bad time and maybe, not doing so well, but politely she will say, I'm fine, thank you. And adults do this all the time. Children will actually tell you, hey, I'm not good. And I don't like that person. So listen to them. That's very important. If someone is pregnant outside marriage, they're sexually abused. Because sexually transmitted disease, they are sexually transmitted. Today, I'm not going to show you any signs or physical signs because we are a public audience here and it's being recorded. But there are many other things: preoccupation with sexual matters, knowing too much, promiscuous children with emotional disturbance or psychosomatic symptoms. And as doctors, this always alerts us. So there are many down here, recurrent abdominal pain, suicide attempt, eating disorders. So these are some of the clues and markers. When I teach doctors, I tell them every child at the back of your mind is sexually abused. That's your differential diagnosis. You see anything, at the back of my mind think, is this also sexual abuse or potential sexual abuse? That's how I look at children. It's sad to think this way and operate this way, but that's the only way we're going to pick up the huge volume of children out there. One thing I do with children a lot is ask them to draw pictures for me. That's why I got pictures of myself drawn, many of them. And, this particular child, I didn't ask him anything, but I just said, hey, can you draw a picture for me? And he drew this. And notice he drew this down here. He's 8-year-old boy. He's in a residential care. He's got a learning disability. He's limited speech. So I asked him, what does this mean? And he drew this in many different human figures, and he pointed to his penis. And then I interviewed him carefully, and he was being anally abused by multiple other older boys in his institution. So drawings are very useful. Children can communicate quite a bit by art, and you might casually see it, but I also use it as part of my option to interview children with sexual abuse, especially younger ones. Okay. Now I'm going to say a word about grooming because it's growing and it's a problem. And the style that adults groom children is they first develop a friendship with a child, young child or teen. They have a sexual intent, but the child doesn't know. Both boys and girls, they might impact, and that could be usually online, but it could be physically as well. They then establish a trust relationship. They're very charming, they're very understanding, they're very caring. Parents may be busy, so they're there to listen. And so the children, of course, looking for attention. This attention is given to them. Then they move the relationship to a private one, either online privately or physically privately. Then they introduce sexual activities. And then, of course, they got a hold of the child. They either got pictures or they've had some sexual activity. They threaten the child. And then, of course, they increase the demands. And this is how grooming would happen for a young child or teenager. And we need to know this mechanism and train our children to prevent them from getting sucked into this kind of relationship. Now, a word about child abuser profile in case you need to know. Okay. Now, many people, sorry, I apologize. Many people think that it's a stranger. The data all shows that most of the time we know who the abuser is. For physical, it's mother, father, but for sexual, the number 1 abuser is father. The number 2 abuser is father. The number 3 abuser is father. And we need to get this message out to our community that the primary sexual abuser of children is father. This is all the data from our community studies. The second is stepfather, then uncle, then neighbor, teacher, religious data. Even from reported data from JKM, you can see that these people rate very, very high inside. So it's usually someone someone who should protect you. It could be a doctor, it could be a religious teacher. Remember that 5% of sexual abuse is done by women, the vast majority by men. And in the community data, there is no sex, ethnic, age, or social class bias. But in the reported data, it looks like it's more girls and it's more Malays. That's not true. Chinese, Indian, Iban, Kadazan all get sexually abused in the same rates as Malays do, but the reporting rates may be different. And boys and girls, maybe slightly increasing girls, but not that much difference, and all social classes. So I want to move away from this thinking, which is, in our public's thinking is some humsap, dirty old man in some strange place that's happening. No, it's by the average looking father in the home over a long period of time. That's one more thing. The symptomology of child abuse is happening for years. The children I see have been sexually abused 200 times for 3 years, 500 times for 5 years before we discover. So it's very different from the way the public think about it. So sometimes I believe this word rape is inappropriately used for sexual abuse for children. Now, rape is a very emotive word. The press like to use it. The child has been raped. Sure, sexual abuse doesn't sound emotive to them, but the symptomology is different. Rape of an adult is often an act of violence. Usually is limited. It can be prolonged. It can be a sex slave and be prolonged, but usually limited. That can be death. Okay, but it's somewhat limited. It can be gang rape. But sexual abuse is very, very long-standing before it's discovered usually. Okay, and because it's done within the context of the family, the hymen is not important finding in sexual abuse. And public is very confused also about pedophiles and compared to the average sexual abuser, which is the family member. Okay, so I asked the artist to draw sexual abuse. So I want to show you this is not sexual abuse. This is what rape looks like. Sexual abuse does not look like this. Sexual abuse where the child is made to cooperate with the other person, and so does not look like this. Also, I want to say very clearly, it's not true that children are only harmed by severe abuse. The emotional, psychological, spiritual damage is equally bad no matter what kind of abuse. And I have worked with children who at age of 7 were just, had someone take off their clothes and run their hands on the body. That's it, one episode, never recovered fully. At 50, still struggling as an adult. So don't think that it's the penetration that's worse, but all kinds of abuse. And this is what a child feels like, a boy or a girl. They feel like a torn flower that can never be put together again. Okay. Why do children keep quiet about sexual abuse? Because there's a lot of emotional blackmail and threats placed on the child. I'll kill your mother, I will kill you. guilt quite often. They fear not being believed because people actually don't believe children. In my experience, 50% of the time they spoke up, but parents didn't listen to them. Shame and embarrassment, concern that they will blame, and please let's not blame children. Not sure who is safe to tell. Wanting to protect the abuser sometimes because it's their family member, and sometimes not even aware that it's abuse. They're told that this is okay, this is normal. We've had some of that in Malaysian reports recently as well. I want to tell you that the long-term outcome is that abusers cannot be rehabilitated by any program that I'm aware of. If you got data, please show me. Very poor data on this. So for that reason, we often have to disrupt the family if there's incest, other children to be rescued, and we need long-term support and counseling for the child and also the family. There's little hope for a good outcome in the Malaysian courts, so I don't hope for that anymore. 95% of them don't even reach our courts. So basically, we work with JKM and we rescue children. We work with NGOs to support this family member. So let's move on to the key topic for today, which is handling disclosure. And we're going to talk about for parents, for childcare providers, for teachers, for social workers. And I'm going to do some interactive session. I think this is the best way. So here's a 3-year-old girl that the mother noticed her panties has some blood stain and a bruise on her inner thigh. When she questioned her, she says the father played with her private parts a number of times. So she brings her to the health clinic. So this is a health clinic setting, okay? So usually I do this kind of EMQ. Today we're limited time, so I won't ask you to answer these, but what should we do? Huh? The thing not to do is ask the mother to bring the child to hospital. Quite often they might disappear along the way. The thing to do is make sure you've got good details about address, phone number, and so on. In case the child disappears, we can call JKM to go and pick up this child. We can fill a Borang 9, give to JKM and rescue this child. The right thing is this one, escort the child to a hospital. If you're working in Perak, call the pediatricians. I've trained them all. They will accept you immediately and they will fast track you to their ward straight away. Okay, but many places you escort the child to the hospital, and ideally we should actually escort the child straight to the ward. Okay, I don't really use OSCC for young children. It's not a great place for them. I prefer coming straight to the ward. Of course, we admit, then we make a police report, we notify JKM. Okay, this kind of child will have signs of sexual abuse, but the difficult part is that, how are you going to get the child's evidence? You can get some story for them, but the court is not going to accept it. The public prosecutor will close the case. So right now, you have to talk to the mother. You have to leave this marriage, which is messy. She may have financial needs. We have to pull in an NGO or other women's groups to come and support her, relocate her somewhere. One very important thing that we fail quite often, many doctors fail, is a good medical report. And a good medical report for JKM and the police must have a conclusion. In the department that I ran for many times, I don't wait for the request. We write the report routinely and give it to them. You don't need to wait for them. It's not a paid report. It's a medical report that's needed. And, we just ask JKM, you just request it's ready already. And inside there, we say very clearly, this child has been sexually abused. And so that gives JKM the power then to support this child. If the mother doesn't want to leave the family, then the child and all other children have to leave the family and then end up in a children's home somewhere. Okay. Here's another one. This is a community one. A 4-year-old girl complains to teacher about pain in her private parts. Teacher tells the girl's mother, who says she will look into it. 2 weeks later, the child has the same complaint. So teacher's not happy with the mother's reassurance. So she approached you. So I'm not sure who you are. She might be approach you, a social worker. She might approach you, a doctor. She might approach you, another teacher. So what should we do next? Now, the thing not to do is ask the mother to bring the child to the hospital. This, again, they're not going to come. The thing to do is tell the teacher to bring the child to the hospital. Child Act will protect this teacher. Okay? Of course, you can call JKM and other things as well, but this is the best step. In case you choose this option, ask the mother to bring the child to the hospital. What will happen is quite often they will stop coming to nursery and then you lost the child. What do you do next? The next thing actually is to call JKM, but many of you are not familiar. What I would suggest you do is you get hold of a pediatrician or doctor, tell them about it. They can fill a Borang 9 and call JKM. And then they can go to the house. So we call JKM, and JKM will, of course, ask for formal notification, which is fine. And we can fill a Borang. This is the single most powerful Borang in Malaysia, as far as I'm aware. It's so powerful. Huh? You can rescue children with it. So the problem is sometimes some JKM officers will say this, Amar, kita dah pergi rumah, tak ada tanda-tanda penderaan. Now, this is not right. There are 3 different authorities here, JKM, police, and health. What is police role? to find who's the perpetrator, settle the legal issues and all that, got enough evidence or not. JKM's role is protection. What's health role? Our role is to say abuse or no abuse, clinical role. So JKM cannot make this decision. So what I will tell JKM is, you please bring the child. If you don't want to bring the child, I will call your pengarah right now. I always do that. Because all the pengarahs usually will say, yeah, hey, of course the child needs to come into hospital for examination. So don't allow JKM to say this. Some officers are overworked and they just want to close the file. It's not true across the board, but there are some who have done this to me in the past. Okay, all right. Now I want to say here that, you know, under the Child Act, there are a number of duties of different individuals, and the child care provider has a very, very clear duty that if you believe on reasonable grounds that a child is abused, okay, you shall immediately notify a social welfare officer. You can, of course, notify a doctor as well. So notice that there is provision in the Act for this. And if you do not do so, you can be imprisoned for 2 years or fined 5,000 ringgit. Okay. Now, what a definition of a childcare provider is not so clear, but anybody looking after children is how I read this to be. Huh? Okay, so please recognize that. Notice also, it protects you. If you inform, you are protected by the courts, so nobody can sue you in the future. Let's take another one. I'm doing this interactive because I think situations help us understand how we're going to handle disclosure in different situations. Huh? And all these are real situations in my life. I can tell you hundreds of them. A nursery teacher tells you the 5-year-old boy in her class pulled down the panties of a female classmate and put his finger up her vagina. He also butted her from the back as though he was simulating sex. What do you do next here, I wonder? And also I want to ask, who has been abused? So here you must recognize immediately that 2 children have been abused. That girl has been abused by this boy, but this 5-year-old boy is heavily sexualized. And he has been abused as well. I later found out that this 5-year-old boy has been allowed to watch his parents having sex many times in different positions and so on. So he's just copying what he's seeing. He's not doing it as a sexual act. Okay. And of course, we had to admit both children and we had to deal with both sets of parents to support them. Okay. All right. Here's another one. I heard of the 3-year-old girl who had been sexually abused in a nursery setting. This was a kindergarten, kindergarten plus a nursery, they had that. And the parents had seen a private pediatrician, who then confirmed that there was sexual abuse, there was some trauma, to her genitalia. Then what happened is the nursery management and parents decided to keep the incident quiet. Jatuh marwah, you see, lose face if we tell anybody our nursery things. But the information reached me through a third party. It could also do that to you, reach you to a third party. Yeah? What do you do in this situation? Do we just let it go? Or, this private pediatrician, of course, is a mess as well. He is required by law to notify JKM, but he has not done so. Huh? Okay. So my concern here is, who is the abuser? Is the person a teacher? Are the rest of the children safe? So when I found out this, the first thing is I goring the private pediatrician completely and threatened him that, the law can be taken against you and don't you ever do this again. And secondly, I went to the kindergarten and I met the management and I goring them as well, properly told them, we can shut down your nursery if you behave like this. So we reported the child to JKM. We changed the entire SOP for the nursery. They do not know who the abuser was. Nobody knew, okay? We re-vetted their staff for them for safety profile. So recognize our aim is to not just rescue this one child, but to see where the system has failed and to keep on fixing the system for these children. I don't think this nursery will ever allow such an event to happen again. And they fix all their blind spots, they put up CCTV cameras, a lot of things were done to make this place safer. Here's another one, which I'm seeing increasingly more, and in my practice, very tough for me to manage this. A 9-year-old boy, he spotted his grandpa watching porn movie on his laptop in the living room. So when grandpa wasn't around, he got a USB, a smart fella, and he copied all the videos and images. And then he watched them on the handphone whenever he got a chance. When he got access to a handphone, he watched it there. Then he started to masturbate very often. He's 9 years old, he's entering puberty, he's exploring his sexuality. Then he went to school and there he asked one of his classmates, male classmates, to perform sexual acts with him. Then he got caught by a teacher. So then he was sent over to me for help. I wish I'd taken a picture of his face just to share with you how troubled it looked, how distressed and full of images and mess that his brain was, of course, we fixed grandpa, in this kind of situations, I don't really want grandpa to go to jail, but grandpa is not smart. and we fixed it. JKM, of course, was informed about this, and of course, we had to make a police report, all this, but we told them, no need to progress, and we had talked to the other parents about why this happened and tell them not to take action against this young boy, and he needs help. But it took me 6 months of very frequent counseling, meeting him to reimagine his brain, his whole thinking, moving away from huge number of sexualized images to come to more wholesome images of what it's like and how to relate back to people alone. So it's not easy to help people when they're heavily sexualized with porn. It tends to actually saturate that person and becomes an addiction of some sort. Here's another one. A 10-year-old student wants to confide in you. She says you must promise not to tell anybody about this. You agree. And then she tells you her father has been sexually abusing her and says that it's all her fault. Her father says she's very beautiful, has made him lose control. Mother's not meeting his sexual needs. So having sex with his daughter has become very important in his mental health. So she feels conflicted and feels very guilty. She feels responsible for father's sexual needs. At the same time, she knows this is not exactly correct. Okay, and so you need to think about what to do here. And the thing not to do is not to speak to the child's father or the child's mother about it, but straight away report this to welfare department or take the child to a hospital for a thing. The problem is you promised not to do anything. Now you're going to betray this child's trust. Don't do that when people want to have confidentiality with you. I'll explain in a moment how to do it correctly. So I want to summarize again the duties of many other people. Medical officer or medical practitioner, we must inform JKM, and for a medical officer working in government or university, we are required to take the child to temporary custody, required by law. When a child appears at our door, at our clinic or hospital or casualty, we are required. And again, we can be fined $5,000 or jail 2 years for not taking action or not reporting to JKM. Okay, family members have the same kind of fine in jail. They're also required to immediately notify a welfare officer. But this line, I think, must change in the ACTA. Any other person, may give information to social worker. I think must mandated to give information to social worker. So the general public is not mandated by law, just suggested by law to give information about sexual abuse. I think we should fix this in the ACTA. I want to say here that adults need to trust children when they disclose any inappropriate sexual contact and not dismiss it. This is an extremely important message. The child tells you, believe them, full stop. In the rare situation when you're having a divorce proceedings, you've got to be a little bit careful. Otherwise, in most other circumstances, this is almost always true. Okay. So how some practical aspects of having disclosure from all the situations I shared with you? First of all, when people want to disclose, it's best to have a safe place to have a conversation, not in an open area. And always, if you can, have a chaperone. If you cannot, make sure you have an open door or glass window where someone can see you. Don't be caught in a situation where you are doing one-on-one with the child, and then you are then implicated as having sexual abuse the child as well. It's happened to a colleague of mine. So don't open yourself to this. I always tell all doctors, I will tell all teachers, everyone, when someone will disclose with you, have a chaperone or do it in an open door where people can walk past anytime and see what's happening. Secondly, you need to reassure the child or teenager about confidentiality, that you won't tell anybody, but you must say at the same time that if you are being harmed or you're planning to harm others, this confidentiality will not work. Okay, this is very, very important. So you will have to tell those who are responsible. No, sorry, there's a mistake there. Just those who are responsible if someone is harming them or they're planning to harm someone else. This is very important. So it's not 100% confidentiality. Okay, some areas of disclosure I also covered in the cyber safety booklet may be valuable for you. Now you then listen to their concerns, what they say, and listen. Don't ask too many questions at this time. Give them a chance to express it in their own words at that time. And avoid any judgmental outcome. You respond with kindness and support, not alarm. You've got to keep calm. Don't suddenly have a horrible face, and then you actually will traumatize the child further. You just keep calm. It's very not easy sometimes when they share horrible things with you, but we need to do that. Should you take notes? I do not take notes at this time. I think it damages the disclosure. I take notes later. Because if you start writing straight away, a child's talking, they will stop talking. I can tell you for many children. Okay, because suddenly it looks like it looks like a legal issue to them. So listen to them, which is very important. Then you must reassure them that abuse is not their fault. They need this immediately from the very start. As I said, record all the information after the conversation is over. Record as much detail as you can. Then you inform the relevant authorities. As doctors, of course, we immediately informed the JKM, and of course, I will lodge a police report. We don't need anybody else to lodge a police report. We do so. If you are a social worker, if you are a teacher, then I think you can either inform JKM, or the better thing is bring the child to hospital. That is the best thing. Why am I saying that? Because there's more staff in MOH and JKM. JKM is chronically short-staffed. Okay. And the protection officer may be very, very busy running around just trying to meet our needs. Then we have to support the child through the process. Who supports the child depends on that. If you're an NGO with the capacity, do that. Otherwise, it's going to be the organizations. I think most Ministry of Health services depend entirely on the interest of the people who are working there. For me, at the early days, I saw every child who abused myself. And then I got a couple of colleagues working with me, and we shared the workload, to do this, but not every department will have that kind. It's got to be the same person for the process. It cannot be a changing doctor or changing NGO worker or changing JKM staff through the process. It's got to be the same person the child sees. Now, you need to be honest with children. And I think don't lie to children. Children are very susceptible to our lies. They can be damaged by it. And we like to tell children that be kept safe and protected from further abuse, but this is not possible to achieve. In my experience, I've not been able to achieve it all the time. So I tell children, I will try my very best to keep you safe and protect you. That's what I say, but I don't promise that it's going to be 100% that I can do this. Here's a 9-year-old child from an undocumented migrant family, and she tells an NGO worker, a civil society organization worker, that she's been sexually abused. Can the system help this child? Many people ask this. Let me tell you that many JKM officers say, no, Amar, kita tak boleh tolong dia, dia bukan warga negara Malaysia. No, it's not true. Let me say very carefully and clearly, the Child Act covers all children in Malaysia, and Ali will definitely agree. We can see him nodding already. But some JKM officers, no, they don't know the ACTA sometimes. Sometimes we help the JKM officer learn the ACTA. I have 2 copies. I have one at work, one at home, plus I got soft copies. So I constantly, I think every week I look at the ACTA kanak-kanak in my lifetime. I must tell you that. So don't do nothing. Don't say, oh, they are not Malaysians. The law won't support them. Don't say, go back to your own country to get help. We report them to JKM. Again, the best thing is to bring them to a hospital, get them admitted, and then call JKM for support to support this child. And if the JKM officer doesn't know, you just move higher up. You just move to the pengarah who's probably more knowledgeable and experienced about this. So the Child Act covers all Malaysian children. These rascals who are walking on the street in Sabah, they are covered by this. The moment they arrive in KLIA, you're covered. I'm very depressed that some Treasury and Ministry of Health circulars goes against the Child Act. Maybe it's time for JKM to take action against MOH for going against the Child Act. I think the Child Act is an ACTA, it's a law. These are just circulars. Okay, I noticed there's very poor SOP on the ground to support migrant stateless and those in detention, and there's a lot of confusion in the system. I can fix my own region, but apart from that, many other regions are not fixed in our country, and sometimes they just fall within the cracks. So that's something about disclosure. I hope that gave you an idea about how we handle disclosure in different situations. I'm happy to handle more questions about that. But let's talk about how we can help the child ensure safety. We must understand that we've got very limited personnel, trained personnel to do this. And what are our legal obligations? Okay, so we're talking here about the next steps once you suspect it. Remember that primary focus is the safety of the child. That's paramount for us. Now, I've put a summary of the ACTA kanak-kanak because I'm not sure how many of you will read. Over the years, I've written a summary of the ACTA kanak-kanak, and I must tell you that clause 17 that Ali mentioned is the single most important clause to look at. And remember that suspected abuse is sufficient. We do not need confirmed abuse. Remember that? Oh, I've not enough evidence. No, the child tells you that's sufficient. If you suspect, that's sufficient. Notice here clause 41. The child can ask for care. This happened to me a couple of times. Shouldn't turn up at our doorstep and say, I cannot live with my parents anymore. They're abusing me. You have to take them into custody as a doctor, and we have to support them. Okay. There are 3 groups that can act. The JKM officer. Sadly, the hospital social worker is not included. I wish they were, but the JKM social welfare officer is included. The police are included. Medical officer is included, and each of these people can take into custody. 2 of them temporary. The JKM officer for longer periods, and our job is to notify the JKM officer when we do this. There are lots of other issues on that, and I'm happy actually to go through the whole Child Act at some point if you need training on the Child Act as well. So the next steps in safety of the child, first, admit to a pediatric department. Okay. I think each of you who are not working in medical, you're not in a medical field, you need to find one trusted MOH or university pediatrician. The private cannot take into custody, so you can't use private. Private can notify him. Okay. So you need somebody you trust in Ministry of Health or university, a pediatrician that you like. You know, and I can mention quite a few. I mentioned 15, 20 pediatricians immediately that I would trust, that if you call them, they will immediately take action on your behalf. They will then help you to fast track, as I said, bypass the one-stop crisis center, especially for the younger children. You know, under 12, I definitely would not use OSCC. Even the teenagers, I prefer them in the ward. I try to give them a single room as far as possible, because they need some privacy. You know, one thing I do is that I limit the number of people who can read their notes. A lot of capo people around, you know, who want to read their notes, even medical staff. So we lock their notes in the DDA cupboard, which only the sisters got the key to, that kind of thing. And so admit to the ward, fast track. Usually we admit and then we send the child to the ward, then we admit secondary. That means we send the admission form down later. That is to put the child in a safe place quickly. Immediately notify JKM using Borang 9. This is required by law. And nowadays, of course, we WhatsApp or Telegram them or some way, just send them a PDF copy, and you must be prepared to use a PDF form. Then make a police report. And usually I ask the pediatrician involved and the medical officer involved to make a report. Then get a medical examination done, get a sensitive history. Again, I limit people. I only allow one medical officer and one pediatrician. They will see the child from the beginning all the way to the end. They will see the child on follow-up. They follow through to the end. So the child knows these are the people who are seeing me and being responsible for me. There might be a younger doctor sitting in for learning, but that's about it. If possible, I get the hospital social workers or some of our own staff to go home for home visit, because I know the JKM is busy. And so that report will help JKM understand the home visit, and we may need to rescue children from the home. Usually, if one child has been sexually abused, I see all children from the home, full stop. Sometimes it's happened in a children's NGO home or then crisis. I remember we saw 32 children. Oh God, you know, but we found 6 sexually abused children. Messy, isn't it? Huh? But can you imagine trying to interview 32 children? Is not an easy task for us to do. Okay. Now, something about police reports. There's a lot of confusion on the ground, and I hope you will help me. Okay. Why do we need police reports? We need police reports because we need to take specimens, chain of command, CSI kind of chain of command. We need pictures for court proceedings, and the police pictures are the ones that are laku for court. And so for that reason, any suspected sexual abuse, we launch a police report. Okay. We do not require a police report to act, of course, because JKM can authorize examination for this. We do not need parents to launch a police report for us. Many people say, oh, the parents didn't launch a police report, we can't take action. No, you do not. The Akta Kanak-kanak is very clear. The moment a child who suspected abuse is in front of you, you are required to act. You do not need a police report. So I tell many doctors, you launch the police report. And I tell them, launch a very simple one line. I suspect so-and-so has been sexually abused, full stop. Don't let the police pressure you into lodging a more detailed report. Why? Because they will come and interview the pediatrician and the MO in the ward. And when our details conflict with your police report, we are in trouble. Okay. So even if you come to a situation where, the parents withdraw the police report, you can still continue to act. Okay. This is very important. Yeah. Okay. I'll come back to that in a moment. So, talking to young children, or let's leave that a moment. Let's come to this one. Here's an 11-year-old girl brought to the emergency department for her mother for alleged sexual abuse. Mother's lodged a police report. This is a very common situation for us for young teens. Then the father turns up. He's actually the perpetrator. He's the abuser. Now he has a fight with his wife. Why you lost his report, all this stuff. And then she withdraws the police report because he has threatened her. Then they want to leave the hospital. So quite often in casualty, the younger, less experienced casualty officers let them go. And I've been training a lot of casualty officers. You cannot do this, So what should we do next? We cannot let them go. We immediately take them to custody. We are allowed by law to take them to custody. And then we launch a police report and we inform JKM. Right? So please recognize this is very crucial. Now come back to this one. How to talk to young children when they're ward? Huh? Not easy at all. As I said, you need 2 people working repeatedly with the child, protect yourself and the child. And you need time to develop a rapport. I avoid direct questions. I find direct questions are dangerous. Let's say you got a 4-year-old and says, hey, did anybody sexually abuse you? And then you describe, did anybody put their penis in your vagina or penis in your anus if it's a boy and stuff like that, or the oral cavity or something like that? They will say no, maybe. Then maybe a day or two later, somebody asks them the same question, they will say yes. Why? Because they're suggestible. Under 5, they're suggestible to your questions, okay? And so you must be very careful not to do this. So I usually ask around, I ask a lot of casual questions like, you are going to kindergarten and who's there? Then you come home, who's there? Who bathes you? Who do you sleep with? Anything that's worrying you right now. So we ask sort of circular questions around and round and let the child tell their story. And then we supplement that with physical findings for the child. Use of play, toy art, very, very useful, as I mentioned earlier. We're not having a medical interview with this child here. We're having a play session with the child here. I must tell you that. It's very important to recognize we are going to play with younger children under 6. You're not going to go and do a medical interview. You can do that with your older children. If possible, I do this without the parent around. Sometimes children are very frightened, so we have the mother around. Why not? Because the mother sometimes can be obstructive, and sometimes, the mother can, can hinder the interview by putting too much pressure on the child, right? Let me give you an example of working with a child. I had a 5-year-old child. This was a divorce proceeding, so I was very, very careful about it, and the mother had a new boyfriend, and so the dad reported that there was sexual abuse. So I interviewed a child alone without the mother around. I had another young doctor with me who I was training, and she was my chaperone. And then we just played and we talked about life and so on. And then I said, hey, when you sleep, who do you sleep with? Well, I sleep with my mommy and the koko. Koko is what she called the new boyfriend. Oh, I said, oh yeah, you do that. In the same bed. They said we sleep in the same bed. And then I asked, what happens when you sleep in the same bed? Is everybody dressed? She said, no, sometimes Koko and Mommy both take off their baju. That's a very red flag already. And then what they're doing, I don't know what they're doing. Very, very, very noisy. Things are going on. So they were having sex adjacent to it. And it's very dangerous because then this boyfriend may actually go on to have sex with this young girl. So that's how our interviews happen most of the time with these children. Sorry. So what else do we do in next steps? As I said, rescue all other children. I often give a preliminary report to JKM and police, a very brief one, so that they know what we think. We then go on to give them a very detailed report, which is signed usually by the one pediatrician who's seen, the MO who's seen, and sometimes the obstetrician who has seen, sometimes surgeon if they're also involved. We then, of course, begin the process of the counseling, which of course starts from the moment you see the child. And then when you think about supporting this family and child, and depends again on every different situation. Do they need placement? Are there financial needs? This is mother need divorce support. We have some pro bono lawyers who can come on board, and then court proceedings, which we have to attend and stuff like that. So the support for the family is very varied depending on this. At the same time, there can be very aggressive perpetrators. Sometimes the father come in very aggressive. Again, JKM can support you. JKM can use the akta kanak-kanak to prevent the father from visiting the child while in hospital or in a place of safety. Remember that again, another useful thing we can do. When to inform welfare, when to lodge a police report, when to inform parents, when to inform other teachers and people in school. I think welfare, you inform all abuse mandated by law. Okay, no doubt about this. Police, we inform all sexual abuse and we inform significant physical abuse. We don't inform the milder physical abuse. When to inform parents, if not the abuser, as soon as possible. If the abuser, we don't actually inform them. We're not required by any law to inform them. When to inform teachers and school, if it happened inside the school. If the abuse is systemic, that means it's more than a couple of people. If the NGO home or school systemic, then you need to inform and you need to meet the management and their systemic change. Recently, I had to go and vet one whole school system, a private school system where abuse had happened. And we had to interview a sample of children in the school. So huge, so we interviewed a sample of children. Then I recognized it was wider than that one child who had reported the abuse. And then we had to take more concerted effort to revamp the school's safety profile. Sometimes you run up in this kind of situation. Here's a difficult disclosure. Somebody tells you about a senior individual, a VIP, who runs a childcare facility, and that he's been abusing children, taking advantage of a number of children sexually care. So you inform JKM. After 1-2 weeks, you don't see any action from JKM. So you speak to JKM. He says, kita dah cakap dengan dia, semua misunderstanding doktor, situation is settled. Don't allow this to happen. This has happened to me. It took a lot of effort. I had to go up all the way to Putrajaya and then beyond. I even had to go to the welfare minister because his VIP was very big. And then the welfare minister came down and interviewed the children personally herself. I was very pleased with that. And then, of course, she recognized the abuse that happened. And then the home was shut down and children were rescued. Okay. So you don't accept necessarily what others say. You need to actually take proactive steps. And many of you who are child activists in this group will know what I'm saying. We often have to escalate to get care happening. How to cope with the child? Let's deal a little bit with counseling. I think that you need experience and training. One of the books I would recommend to you strongly is Dips in Search of Self. It doesn't talk about sexual abuse at all, but Virginia Exline is the grandmother of play therapy. She's the one who started play therapy. In this book, which I read 4 times and recommend everybody working with children read, it talks about how to work with a child, how to listen to the child, how to actually interview a child in a sensitive way. Very, very powerful book. This child looks developmentally, having developmental problems, actually was having problems in his home. Really benefited from this book in understanding children. So you need some, like I've had formal training in the UK twice, once 9 weeks residential training. So that has helped me considerably. You need to know yourself, your own weaknesses, your strengths, your limitations. And if you don't work on your own sexual issues, your own prejudice, your preconceived ideas, then you are going to impute that, you're going to bring that to the child. So you're going to work out some of your own baggage that you have. Sometimes, some people who have past hurts will, then, speak a little bit more negatively to the children. I prefer counseling in a male-female team because quite often the abuser is a man, and this brings healing. However, some children may not be initially comfortable with a man and to bring that man in later. Okay, you need a safe environment, as I talked about. A confidential environment is essential, and you need long-term commitment. This is not a one-off. When at work, I usually see people monthly, for many, many months. Sometimes the longest I've seen is 15 years of an individual child. But I also do work at home with my wife. We do survival work at home with permission from the parents or the guardian. And there actually we do more adults and more teens and adults. And there the work is more in-depth because I've got more time at home for this. But still, I usually put the serious ones at the end of my clinic. So at 5 o'clock, we can see this child for an hour at least to work through their issues. A lot of it is listening. Okay. So it's important to recognize that we need to actually, listen to and respect the child. Listen attentively, not just listen, but listen attentively to the child. Now, some things not to do. Don't tell the child to forget what's happened and move on forward. I've heard this quite a bit. This is very dangerous. I've heard it from mothers. I've heard it from professionals. I've heard it from even from counselors. Don't say this. This is dangerous. You bury the pain, and the pain is going to eat this child up in their life. Don't tell them this. Everything's all right. Everything will turn out okay. It's all right. I hear this quite a bit, and don't. It's no. Everything will not turn out all right. We have to work hard to get it to turn out all right. I understand your pain. No, we don't understand anybody's pain. Don't be judgmental. Don't criticize, don't accuse or blame the child. And don't make empty promises that you cannot keep because they end up as another betrayal of trust. Be wary of your body language, okay? And you need to emphasize, the child needs to know that it was wrong, because quite often the perpetrator will say, the abuser will say, oh, your body was so sexual, I couldn't control myself, that's why this happened. Things don't get better with time. It requires work. Okay? All forms of sexual abuse, as I said, are harmful, and there are a lot of long-term problems in terms of depression, substance abuse, body image problems, anger, and acting out that's going to go on. Sometimes happens like this for young children. Here's a 27-year-old woman working with youth in a church setting. She was supporting a pastor and counseling a teen on sexual abuse. At that time, all her memories of sexual abuse at 3 to 5 surfaced. She hadn't remembered them. Now they came out, and then she had a major meltdown, and she was sent to me for support. So sometimes children may repress all their memories, and then they may surface as an adult. I think that you need to recognize that the damage that happens right through the child, not just in their body, not just in their soul, but the spirit. And the primary damage is the betrayal of trust. Many people are worried about the sexual act. I worry about the loss of trust and hope in everybody that this child is now. If you cannot trust your father, you cannot trust a teacher, you cannot trust somebody who's supposed to care for you, then this is what happened. Can I say that, surprising, in one study I did on the children's welfare home, just the rescue from the abuse situation was such a relief for the children that they said, we are now in heaven, we were in hell. Amazing, huh? Even without any counseling at all. Okay. Healing takes a lot of effort. Time doesn't heal. Wounds not attended tends to grow. And there are a lot of anger issues. They'll be angry with themselves. They'll be angry with the mother for not helping them. They're angry with the father because he's the abuser. And then they end up angry with God for not being there for them. And I can talk a lot more about dealing with this. Huh? Ultimately, they must be able to remember the abuse, the memories, and not feel the pain. And that takes a lot of movement forward and a restoration of their body image. One thing that's very important, they must never, ever meet the abuser again, because they're going to get abused again in some form by the abuser. There's no fixed method. There are people that we're dealing with. Listening to the abuser in your heart is very important. Offering space and time, no hurry, no pressure. For younger children, art, writing is very, very useful. Sometimes I get children to write their emotions out, and then we tear and burn the piece of paper as a symbolic gesture, you know. Younger children, as I said, may come back later. We need to come back later in life as realization of what happens grows. Initially, they weren't so aware of what happened. As they grow up, they more realize. And should we take notes for counseling? I don't know. You know, sometimes I have to take notes as a doctor, but increasingly, if I'm doing it at home, we don't take notes because we find that we don't need to remember these painful things. We want to actually let them go. Quite often, the key thing is to be someone who listens without needing to answer, and just be there to let this child, this young child, or this teen ventilate their things. If they are persistent post-traumatic stress disorders or depression that's not going away, self-harm, you need to get professional help. By the way, do support groups work? I do not know. I have not used them because Malaysians gossip a lot. I'm not prepared to put my child with abuse sensitive in a support group with other children. Okay. You, as a counselor, must stay healthy when working with them. You must have boundaries. Don't share your handphone. Dangerous. Okay. You must have support individuals in your life. Usually working with other counselors is very important. We debrief after every session so we can actually, oh God, that was so horrible. And we can talk about all that and we can let go our own emotions, don't take them home. And you can deal with the frustration of failed systems with other people, you know, when the courts fail you or something like that. You must have a mechanism to find joy amidst the despair, because working with children who are abused is a despairing work, let me tell you that. It's a dark work, okay? And you must be able to find joy of your own. I'm coming to the end here in the last couple of minutes. And I've got a set of notes inside the resources talking about, you know, what are our future steps? What should we do? How should we fix our country? And I've listed 10 key things that we should do. But I think number 6 is one of the most important. We must develop both our police, our JKM, and our health services. And JKM needs thousands of new staff, thousands of staff, okay? And preferably people trained in social services, people with a social work degree. We need to do that. It will change. When you work in UK, and I have been in UK, I worked there for 1 whole year, you don't have this kind of problem. You tell the social service, immediately everything is settled. You know, a lot of the fight that I talked about here don't have to happen because their social services will pick up all the pieces and the courts listen to them a lot. But for prevention, I would say number 3 is the single most important thing. We teach all children sexual protective behaviors. What does this mean? We're not actually teaching them sex. We're teaching them what to know your body, good and bad touch. Don't use these words anymore. I usually say appropriate, inappropriate touch nowadays. And by 4 years, we teach them, by 3 to 4 years, we teach them about your body. By 4 years, we teach them unfamiliar or difficult situations, how to respond to strangers, what to do if someone touches you in the wrong place. By 9 onwards, I start to teach about puberty because it's very important. We teach about social media, we teach about porn, we teach about masturbation, we teach about the right to say no and things like that. So much of this training for the younger children is in the manual that I gave you in the links. With exercises there, and I'm happy to run a training session how to use the manual if you need that as well. How can parents and teachers work? Because there's some of you here. I think the key is an ongoing open communication and trust relationships. Not many parents have this with children. We don't encourage children to talk to us. Quite often what we do is, sudah makan ka? Okay, go and do your homework now, all right? Okay, that kind of thing, go and have your bath. I mean, that's the way we talk to our children. We don't lepak with them. You don't need to lepak with your children, okay? You just sit down with them and say, you know, hey, what's happening? You know, I lepak with lots of children over the years, thousands and thousands of children. They tell me things they will never tell their parents. Why? Because I'm there. My ears are open. I don't judge you. I listen, okay? So Open a dialogue with your child and prepare to listen. This applies to teachers as well. Teachers also quite often the relationship is like that, isn't it? Change your relationship with your child to be a peer. Imagine your child is your best friend. How will you treat your best friend? Your best friend, you listen. Your child must become your best friend, and you must become your child's best friend, both as a teacher and as a parent. So open a dialogue. You must help them understand what abuse and danger looks like. But that doesn't mean like saying, you don't go and do this, you don't go and do that. That doesn't work. You discuss situations with them and say, what would you do in this kind of situation and stuff like that. And teach children protective behaviors I talked about. Set boundaries. Children need boundaries. Children need security. Okay, boundaries with the media, boundaries with time outside home, boundaries with their friends. And as they grow, these boundaries must grow bigger and bigger. And at one point, you have to lift these boundaries. Usually by 12 to 14, I will have lifted almost all boundaries on children. Because by that time, they either been trained very well or they are in trouble already. You need to be alert for signs of abuse, and you need to be able to ask your children something's bothering them. And you need to be their support system. That means a child can always come to you as a parent, as a teacher, with any concerns, and you need to remain calm and understand. Don't say, hey, why you did that? Why you allowed that to happen? Then, of course, the child will shut up and never tell you anything ever again. You just be there for them. So this is some very small tips for you. I'm going to end here with this quote, and let's take some questions. Always take the child's statement seriously. Never, please people, never leave a child's cyber situation. Sometimes somebody will tell me after a talk like this, there's a child there, immediately I am going to do something. I may never have seen the child, but the fact that I know a child is stuck somewhere in an abuse situation, I will act and push until the child is rescued. So please let's rescue all children that we discover. And of course, we need, as Amy would say, we need prevention mechanisms, as I talked about here, prevention mechanisms to prevent sexual abuse from happening in our children. And finally, as one 7-year-old girl said, who was sexually abused by a father, the worst thing in life is you cannot change your memory. And how many children have told us, Amar, there's a dark shadow in my heart. It clings to my heart. I can never be healed. I don't know when I will ever be normal. My life is shattered. And this is what many boys and girls who have been sexually abused share with us. Okay, back to all of us.